So I want to start today talking about a story. And it's a story that I witnessed this week. And I was at the gym, and I was on the elliptical. You know, the elliptical's where you're going like this. And I'm going along, and this woman that I've seen for about 3 years, she's a beautiful, beautiful blonde. She's probably in her latter 30s, early 40s. I know that she's married and she has a couple kids. And when this young lady walks into the gym, she beams energy. And so as I watch her, I'm on the second floor of the gym, and I watch her come in through the door at the front, and I can see she's greeting everyone with big hellos, and people are just smiling. There's a glow about her. And she comes up the stairs, and she's coming to the cardio, and she's coming past my machine, and she looks at me, big grin, reaches out, touches my hand, and says, "Good morning." And then she walks over to the man that's on the elliptical next to me, and her entire disposition changed. And she got a very stern look on her face. She got very serious, and she started talking to him. And as I listened, I realized it was her husband. And the man who was there is as attractive a man as she is a woman. But she was talking to him, and as she talked to him, he was on his phone. He was ignoring her. So I sort of just absorbed that, and then I saw her just turn, walk away, and her whole position, her whole face changed again. And she went on, and she went downstairs. And so I finished my cardio, and I went downstairs, and I was doing some free weights. And I noticed that she was there doing a machine, and this man walked by, and she started talking to him, and she was aglow. And all of a sudden, I saw her husband from a distance start coming over. It was like he was protecting territory. You know where I'm going with that. And the second he got close, energy immediately changed. And I asked, why? Why is it that two people who at one point were so in love, were so much in the glow, lost it? They lost that feeling. And what I've come to understand is that there is a natural cycle in relationships. And that cycle is constant, it will always be there, and it is continuous. And so in the course of what we talk about today, I'm going to go through and share with you all the steps into forming a love relationship. And it doesn't have to be with a life partner. It can be with anyone in your life. But there's an art to it, and the art always starts with us. It always starts within us. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Lee Wolak. I'm the founder and senior director and teacher at Agape. I've been married for 42 and a half years. So what I intend to do today is to impart all of the wisdom that I've had in all of my relationships for the 64 years of my life. And I'm going to give with you not only what I've learned, but what I've learned from some of the greatest teachers that I've come in contact with. And I'm like Elaine, I'm a relationship junkie, in that I enjoy hearing other perspectives. I want to hear it from other points of view. So today, I may not say anything new, but what I'm going to give you is what has worked for me. And so I'm not going to tell you that what I'm doing is right. I'm going to tell you this is something that you can consider and you might want to try for yourself. I want you to know this, that everything that you are seeking is already within you. There's nothing you have to find. You are not missing anything. And that's the illusion which almost everyone is functioning under. They believe that there is something missing from their life, and they are seeking to find that through another person. And in that seeking alone, they are destined for failure. Can I be more clear? No. So I'm going to start out with the very, very basic question. What is love? Because we can't begin any other place than with that question. And what I've come to understand is that before we can have love with anyone else, there must be self-love. And what is self-love? Self-love is knowing who you are. It is knowing at the core of your being that you are not just this carbon form. You know, our body is made up of carbon, and so many times we think that this body is who we are. It's an aspect of us. We have a mind, but we have a soul. And that soul is the expression of the infinite. That soul is perfect. There is nothing that is missing in it. So when we look at ourselves from our soul point of view, can we not accept ourselves as we are in this moment? You see, that is the key element of love. It is not romance. It is not anything else. It is the acceptance of ourselves, not only accepting ourselves, but knowing we are enough. We are everything that we need in this moment. So when I define it, I talk about that the expression of love is supporting ourselves. It's knowing that we are this infinite expression, and we support that. Everything we do in our lives is to nurture that quality within us. And then, being in a state of self-love, what we draw to us are opportunities, people, situations that allow us to grow in awareness of that which we already are. So we're trying to attract people, places, things, events to us that allow us to grow more aware of our magnificence. And in that growth, is it always going to be pretty? It's going to be contrast, isn't it? Because we cannot grow without contrast. So I know that in the dating world, many thousands of years ago when I did date, I had a lot of contrast. And I was always looking for a woman who would be just easy. Easy to be with, fun, joyful, would accept me as I am, and not give me grief like everyone else had. Well, I got all the grief and more. You know, I went from one relationship to another. Well, I learned from this one, and I went to another one. Didn't learn it enough, went to another one. Didn't learn it enough, went to another one. Went back 3 times to one. Guess what I got? Same experience. Because I was looking for that which was in me and I was seeking it outside of me, I was destining myself to failure. I didn't find the person that I am now partnered with for 42 and a half years until I gave up trying. I had only a 3-month break from the last relationship. I went through the summer of Lee. That was my favorite summer, I want you to know. The summer of Lee was where Lee just dated, and Lee didn't get involved, and Lee was quite the party animal. And as I reflect back, I wasn't the nicest. I didn't treat the ladies I had been with in probably the most nicest fashion. But at that moment, I realized today I was learning. I was understanding through those experiences that what I was getting there, I was not seeking. So I want you to know that there is nothing we do in our lives that's a mistake. There's nothing that happens to us that's a mistake. Everything in our lives is there for us to look at, evaluate, and take a decision from that and move in a different direction. Does that make sense? So I don't regret anything I've ever done. All the crazy things, all the things that I've had to do a lot of work on that I'm apologizing, I do not regret them. I honor them. I am very grateful for them because I couldn't be the person I am now without those experiences. So this self-love is something that we have within ourselves. I will share this with you, that love is an adventure. It is not going to this illusionary place where you're in bliss with this partner. It's an adventure where you are constantly exploring new ideas, new ways of being. You're growing. You're supporting them while they're growing. It's an adventure. It's doing new and exciting things. You don't want to become a couple or whatever the relationship is, where you're sitting back and every day is the same thing. Honey, bring me a beer. You know, the old Archie Bunker type image where it's day in, day out, the same routine. Love is constantly changing. When it's changing, it's accepting. Do you see that? That's the interesting thing. I'll share with you today. Being in a state of love and loving yourself has nothing to do about another person. Today at Agape, for example, in our service, our singer that we were supposed to have got sick. So came in, I was told. I said, well, that's nice, we'll adjust. I accept it. Now, in that acceptance, I didn't have the low. I accepted it. Then, as we went on with the service, later on found out that the sound through the board didn't work for the recording. So we're getting a secondary sound source. You accept it. Every time there's something going on and there's a change happening, you don't respond, you don't react, you go into an acceptance mode. What you're saying is, things are okay. There's nothing I need to be concerned about. Because I know in my younger years, someone didn't show up, I might have had a few choice words about that. And then I would say, what about the sound? Well, darn it. And I would have gotten myself off. But why, if I self-love, if I'm accepting myself, if I'm not in judgment of myself, if I'm in a place where I'm talking about support and growth, and I always use the term fun. I love the term fun, but fun is different than what you've probably heard before. I look at fun as being in a state where you are aligned with your highest values. Do you hear that difference? Being aligned with your highest values. That's the most important thing. It's remembering what we're about and fully living in the experience. You see, if you love yourself, no matter what the experience, why wouldn't you be fully present? Even if the situation is not what you want, be fully engaged. Because in that engagement, you're conscious. So you're having a dispute with someone, okay? If you're fully engaged and you're saying, well, it's really interesting the way that person's responding. I wonder if it was my tonality. I wonder if it was the words I chose. That pressed their button. Do you notice I said their button? I'm not taking responsibility for it because I'm not responsible for how anyone else feels. I am only responsible for how I feel. In 42 and a half years of relationship, I don't know how my wife feels unless she tells me. The only person I know how they feel is me. The thing that we've done in our lives is we've blocked off feeling. We've blocked it off because we think it's painful. We blocked it off because we've had relationships in our past that have not worked. We blocked it off because we've had parents whose relationships were not exactly the most inspiring. We blocked it off because we've watched our friends have it. We've blocked it off because we've had relationship after relationship after relationship that has caused us pain. And so we're not in the moment anymore. We're already thinking, where is the next failure? Where is this person going to make their next mistake? Where am I going to make the next mistake? Am I even worthy of it? Do I deserve it? Let's put that question aside right for now. Do you deserve it? Yes. Are you worthy of it? Only if you choose. One of the interesting things is that when I decided to get married back in 1972, I decided at that point, no matter what, relationships would be easy for me. And everyone laughed at me. It doesn't mean I didn't have contrast. I really want to express that. This doesn't mean that, and we'll go into that later. I have had lots of contrast in my relationship, but it's never been where it's been hard. It may be that I had to do work, and work is okay. And what I'm not doing here is I'm really saying to you, it doesn't matter if you're in a relationship for 42 and a half years, or you've been in a series of relationships for 42 and a half years. It doesn't matter. It's about where are you now. Probably the next thing after knowing who you are is, what is your purpose? I'm going to say that real clearly because, even doing all the workshops I do and all the travel that I've been doing, all the people that I meet, whether it's at Agape or otherwhere, I ask, tell me what your purpose is. Most people don't have a clue. It may be as simple, I'm a mother. That's okay. Being a mother is a great purpose if that's what you've chosen. Most people don't know. Then here's the question that blows them away every time. What are your top 5 values? Most people can't even begin to tell you. They'll mouth something off, and then I ask the question, are you living them? And they're not. And here's the thing about your top 5 values. They're always changing. There was a time in my life when my family was my number one value. Prior to my family being the number one value, there was a time that my career was my number one value. There was a time before my career that just partying like a crazy man was my number one value, and I did that at the highest of levels. But then, after a while, when I went from partying to having a relationship, being with one woman, to going and having a family, to going or to career, then family, then I watched career step down. It went down to my second value. And I noticed that when I started to live in my career world, I made decisions for my career based on my top value. That top value probably held me back. I could have gone higher in the corporate world. However, I didn't value it. I was not willing to sacrifice my top value. And I'm not saying my values are right, but at the time, my values were right for me. So I was making decisions based on what my values are, and I got my value because my father was not present when I was growing up. My dad was working 2 or 3 jobs. My mother was as present as she could be, but she started working a lot of jobs. So I never had parents that would come to a ball game and watch me. I never had parents that were really very supportive. They didn't know. They were doing their best. They had no clue. So when I became a father, that value stopped me from drinking. That value stopped me from smoking. That value stopped me from going to the bars because that was the most important thing in my life at that moment. I started to live that value. And then I became the best father I could, doing what I thought. Could I have been a better father? Today I would be a better father. When I was being a father, I was the very best I could be. That's something you should write down. Know that at any moment of time when you've done something that you're not proud of, in that moment, that was probably the best you could do. And isn't that easy to get over if you just look at it that way? Because if you could have done better, you would have. Because there's no way you wouldn't have. But at that moment, you couldn't have done better. And so why not accept that? We're going back into self-love now. Why not accept all those moments? You see, that's about that. I believe that we have 2 purposes. One is a higher purpose. And higher purpose, I'm looking at it that it's something that's bigger than what we consciously think about it. And I call that purpose self-realization, or even better, self-actualization. It simply means to realize and lives one's full potential toward your purpose. Does that make sense? So my idea is that's my number one value, self-actualization. I don't just want to realize it and say self-realization, because realizing something is different than actualizing something. Actualizing it means it's in your life, you have embodied it, you're living it to the best, you are aware of it all the time. But you see, you can't become self-actualized till you understand what you value, and then from what you value, you determine your purpose. You see how this is all tied in together. Now, if you want to self-love, can you self-love if you haven't determined what you value? Probably not. Can you self-love if you haven't determined your purpose? Probably not. because you haven't taken the time to look and see who you are. That's the fascinating thing. We're so afraid to see who we are. And it's not just the image that we see in the mirror, but rather it's the image of the mental, the physical, and the spiritual side of us. And it's not just what everyone else sees, it's what's unique within us that's desiring to come out. We have a lower set of values or a lower purpose. That's where I think our values come in. Our first value is self-actualization, becoming our greatness, living our greatness. Our lower values, why am I here on planet Earth? What is I want to do at planet Earth right now? And I'll tell you that without that goal, I was watching the comedian, is it Steve Harvey? He was there and he was on Oprah. And he was talking to Oprah about 5 things that if a woman should do when she meets a man. And these are things that every woman's got to ask these questions. And I don't remember the 5, but I remember number 3 and number 4. And he said to Oprah, he says, the woman's got to look at the man and it's got to say, what are your short-term goals? Got to know does this man, has he thought enough, or woman, I guess, what are your short-term goals? And then you want to ask the question after you've got those down, say, what are your long-term goals? Because if a person doesn't know their short-term or their long-term goals, can they be self-loving? No. If they're not self-loving, is that a relationship you want to get into right now? Because you're going to get into a situation where the person doesn't know who they are, they don't know who their values, they can't, listen to this, they can't be authentic. And don't you want to be with someone who's authentic? You see, authenticity means you know who you are, you know it at the core of your being, and then knowing what you value, know your purpose, you just start living. You never have to question who you are. You're authentic. I am Lee. Watch me make a fool of myself. It's okay. It's part of my values. Being a fool is fun. Being a fool, being fun and joy-filled and being outrageous is a fun thing if it's natural to you. Here's the thing. When you determine your values and you determine your purpose, you don't give a flip what anyone else thinks. And that's key. Because Don Miguel Ruiz in the 4 Agreements said it so clearly. Be impeccable with your word. How can you be impeccable with your word if you don't know what you value and you don't know your purpose? Okay? Then he talked about never make assumptions. Never think you know what the other person's going to think. You don't. You don't. You never will, so don't even think it. Always do your best. Isn't that about being self-actualized? Always doing your best, becoming more. And then the last one, never take anything personally. Because why would you take something personally if you're being authentic? The only time you would take something personally is if you're not authentic. If you're not settled in your views, if you're not centered in your values, if you don't know your purpose, you're floating out there. You're just blowing in the wind. You've got nothing holding you down. You're not grounded in that moment if you don't know these things. And then someone says something, you go, oh my God. And you try to change. But what are you going to change into? You're lost, aren't you? That's where we feel depressed. That's where we feel anxiety because we don't know where to turn. So what do we turn? Well, let me go find a new relationship, or let me get some booze, let me get some drugs, let's have more sex. Sex is a great thing, and I've got a whole section on sex in this presentation. But sex used to cover up and mask is not good. It's just another addiction. Make sense? I want you to know that the purpose of a relationship is not to make you happy. That single thing alone destroys most relationships. We've been brought up, and I'm going to the American dream. We've bought into this idea of the American dream where you have a life partner. You have your home in the suburbs. You have your 2.2 children. You have your 2 cars. You've got the country club. You're brought up with this illusion that you're happy. And when you have it, you realize there's still that big, infinite hole in your heart, and it's not filled. I know I was there. I worked all my life to have what my parents told me was the American dream, and I achieved it. And once I got there, I said, where's my happiness? That's when I started on my spiritual journey, and that's where I started to discover. And the question I asked from day one, once I decided to get back into looking at this infinite power and presence, this idea of spirit, I tried to do it through religion. I couldn't. There was too much dogma. So I went, and the question I would ask, and it's been a perpetual question for me, what is love? And I've listened to everyone talk about love, and most people get caught up in the idea that it's romantic and that it's about, this is my better half, or this is my other half. No, you don't have another half. You're already perfect. You're already whole. It's just the awakening and the realizing of it, that it already exists. So if you think that that person coming into your life is to make you happy, I promise you will be disappointed. At least that's my experience. I will tell you this. The purpose of a partner is to support and teach us. And they're to help us come back to balance. And I think that is really, really a key point, is that living for me, the state of bliss is knowing that I have great highs, and I may have some great lows, and I may have some mild highs, some mild lows, but I am always in a state of balance. I'm always supported as much as I am challenged. I can never be challenged more than I'm supported. Most of the time, we do not realize that when we are challenged at the highest level, if we were aware enough, we are being supported as well. The universe cannot have a void. There is always equality. There's always a positive charge and a negative charge, and they always balance each other out. You can look at all the cosmos, and you will see that everything is always in balance. That's true for relationships. Okay? Everything is already in you. And everything is always striving to be in balance. And we are always building and we're always destroying. Do you hear that? If a relationship becomes comfortable, too comfortable, we will begin to destroy it. Think about that. When we are too comfortable, it's not where we want to stay. So instead of taking one direction, we tend to destroy the relationship. We'll start picking on things that we don't like. We'll start refocusing. We'll pick fights for no reason. Person's done nothing. It's just we're too comfortable. We're not growing. And we can be comfortable in different stages and different levels as people, depending on our personalities. How quickly do we have a desire to go out in that? I'm one of these individuals that I am constantly seeking growth. Comfort for me is a day or two. Then I'm seeking more. Some people can be comfortable for years, and then all of a sudden, no longer time to be comfortable, and the partner's going, what the heck just happened? I know people who've been married 30, 35 years. All of a sudden one day, partner walks up, I'm leaving you. They've been building for quite a while. And they decided, no more, and they just pick up and leave. And the one partner's saying, what just happened? Well, it was the natural process of a relationship. Unfortunately, we're not taught to be aware. We're not taught to be awake when we're in a relationship. We're not taught to be observing. We're not taught all these very basic principles. So I talk about the roles that we take. They're to support, to grow, to accept, to be non-judgmental, and to be fun. Fun meaning fulfilling what is most meaningful for us. Think about that. When you are fulfilling something that's really meaningful, don't you feel good? That's a fun that stays with you. I know I can be in a place and cause lots of laughter, or other people can cause lots of laughter. That's fun too. But I'm talking about in a state of love. What did Dr. David Deida say? Dr. David Deida in the book, The Way of the Superior Man, talked about 2 simple things that a man can do with a female that will cause them to be in a pleasant way. Okay, not the best, not the total relate, but a pleasant way. The most 2 things that a man can do is to gently touch the woman's arm, her shoulder, or whatever. It's a sign of connection. It's a sign of, I'm with you. The second thing is to make a woman laugh. There's something about laughter that causes us to not take things seriously. I want you to know that after 42 and a half years, my wife will never, ever put me on the speakerphone in her office. Because by God, one day, about 10 years ago, she hit that speakerphone, and there I was, and she says, "Hi, hon," and I let loose probably one of the lewdest, most suggestive remarks, and at that time, she had a large department of probably 13, 14 people, and they all wanted to get sex advice from her afterwards, so she now never hits that speaker button. See, that's the key. You always want to be unpredictable. Think about unpredictability is about what? Growth. I'll talk about where you cannot be unpredictable. There are places in relationship that we must be in accord, and we'll get to that, okay? So let's talk about types of relationships. I think this is really critical because we think that a relationship is always with a partner. And most people start, well, I'm going to go find my perfect mate. The first question I'll ask someone is, how long have you lived alone? Until you've lived alone without a partner for about a year, and you are comfortable being with yourself in every way, I don't believe that you've fallen in love with yourself. I don't think you've given enough time, because most of the time when people are alone, they're trying to find someone. They're on the dating circuit. They're in the bars. They're in the chat rooms. They're everywhere. No. If you're doing all that, you're not alone. That's not being alone. I'm saying you've got to wipe out the idea of a relationship with someone and be happy living your life with yourself, accepting yourself, understanding your values, determining your purpose, being social with people, being by yourself, really living in its fullness so that you, after 1 year, don't need anyone. You don't need a soul. You can go the rest of your existence by yourself, because in truth, you can. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people choose to have that type of relationship. It's only what society says that you have to have a partner. You do not have to have a partner. You could be by yourself and just have all sorts of friends and live a great life. There is nothing wrong with that. When we live alone and we fall in love with ourselves, we realize we're fulfilled. And in that fulfillment, we will attract from multitudes of people what we think we need from one. The universe will not ever leave a void. When my mother passed away, the universe brought all these other people to fill the various things that she supported me in. When my brother passed away, and my brother and I were not close, we had quite an adversarial relationship. When he passed away and those adversarial things disappeared, some other people took up those roles. Just because someone dies doesn't mean you get rid of it. You know what I'm saying? There's the balance. It comes in. So if you are in an absolute crappy relationship and you get rid of it, rest assured you will be balanced out by a bunch of other people bringing you that in. The key thing is, can you balance it in your mind? Can you balance that you're going to be equally supported and challenged at the same time? It doesn't have to be crappy. Take the word crappy out of there. But you're going to be challenged and supported equally at all times. And you get to decide how you want that to be in your life. You can run away from people and attract new people, or keep that cycle of having people move in and out of your life. That's something that happens all the time. So there are two types of relations. The first one's with ourselves, the second one's with others. Really, are you comfortable being alone? I ask that question all the time. I've come to a point where I love being with Lee. When I go do my 10 days of silent meditation once a year, I am totally at bliss. I do not miss my family. I do not miss my wife. I do not miss my community, because I am centered with this essence that is Lee, and I'm expanding and growing me. Then what happens is everyone else in my life is just someone to dance with. But until you can dance on the dance floor by yourself, just take Stacy back there. Stacy gets up, she hears the Cure today, and off she goes into a dance, and doesn't matter who she's with. In fact, she doesn't need anybody. Stacy's dancing all by herself, and she's in absolute bliss. You want to be able to be like that all year long so that you don't have to think. And then what happens? When you least expect it, someone enters in. And you start to find that the dance is easy. See, what I understand about relationships with others is that when we have it, it's about having a partner. It's about having that partner accept us, and we accept that partner just as they are without any desire to change them. And in that acceptance, we start to share life. That's the key. We still maintain our individual life, but we're now sharing the experience. We're sharing the growth on my side, the growth on the other side. We're sharing the support in both ways, and we're sharing the support that comes from outside of ourselves. We're sharing the growth. And so it's actually, you create a second life for yourself. You maintain your individuality and your growth and support and your uniqueness, and you create this other entity that's called us. And that us is based on sharing. And when we are sharing and when we are accepting, we are authentic. That, for me, is a real relationship where I never have to put on a facade. I never have to worry what my partner's thinking. I can be Lee. If I screw up, my partner looks at me and says, "You're screwing up." I then take it into consideration and decide, how do I want to respond? I don't defend myself. Are you listening? When my partner comes to me and says, "Lee, you're being a horse's butt. You are not in alignment with your values and your purpose." And let's face it, we all come out of alignment at some point. We are human. No one is perfect all the time. So I step out of the Lee that I want to be, and I become an old Lee. An old paradigm pops up, and then my partner pops out and says that to me. And I just don't say a word. And then I go evaluate it. I go, "Oh, damn. Right again." And I don't go back and share that I've changed. I just change. Do you hear that? Because it's not about me pleasing her. It's not about me giving her the answer she wants to hear. It's not about me doing it for her. It's me doing it for me, knowing that I want to be the higher Lee, the Lee that I've chosen to be, not the Lee she's chosen to be. She's holding me to my values and my purpose, not to her values and her purpose. Make sense? That's a higher relationship to me. A lower relationship is a relationship that's built on the physical senses. Now, there's nothing wrong with experiencing a relationship at the physical sensory level. I love the physical senses. It's my fifth highest value. It's to experience love in its fullness in this human body through my senses. I want new experiences. I want to know what it feels like to touch, to smell, to taste, to see, to hear new things. That's why I'm in human or physical form. So I value that. But when we base that relationship on those physical sense words, we have to have praise. We have to have power. We have to have pleasure. We have to have safety. We're damned. Because no matter what, we can never get enough. No matter what, we're going to always want more. No matter what, we're going to have to work harder and harder and harder to give it to a partner. And they won't feel it. Think about that. Have you ever been in that relationship where your partner has said, I want you to be this way? And you give it and give it and give it and give it, and they keep telling you, I don't feel you're doing enough. They can never feel it, because the only way they can feel it is when it comes from within them. You as a partner cannot make your partner whole. You can make yourself whole. You cannot make your child whole. You cannot make your grandchild whole. You cannot make your parent whole. You have to always, in any relationship that you're in, not just a life partnership relation, you have to always be authentic. So I remember so clearly when one of my sons was going through the teenage years and I became the Antichrist. I was the weird dad. I was the dad where my son went to a all-Christian, totally, deeply, deeply Christian school. And here I am, the rebellion man. I'm questioning everything about religion. I'm teaching things that are considered woo-woo. And I was told things like, I never want to see you again, and other things of that nature. I never stopped being me. I never changed. And then when the moment came, we were able to reconnect because I was still authentically Lee. You have to allow people in your lives to go through their change in their own way, in their own time. You cannot speed it up. You cannot slow it down for them. Everyone will do it at their own time, and we must allow that. I will say this, it was harder for me to do with children than it was for me to do with a spouse or a partner before. We are very, very attached to our kids. But the whole thing is, our kids will be testing us always. Are we authentic? Are we real? Are we living up to our values? Do we even know our values? Do we even know our purpose? Our kids intuitively know how to sense that. And you see, our kids will never listen to what we say. Our kids will respond by watching us. So I will share with you that when you're in a relationship with someone, don't tell them you're going to change. It's a waste of time. Become the change and let them see it when they're ready. See, you're not doing it for them then, you're doing it for yourself. When you decide to make a change, you're never changing for someone else, you're changing for yourself. And you know when you're doing the right thing for yourself, so you stay centered in that. You see, power. People want to have power over the other. They want to hold them down. They want to be jealous. They want to judge them. They want to control them. Anytime someone's putting power on you, run. It's not a relationship. If you are there for their pleasure alone, you're there to give them and feed them and do all this, it's never going to work. The whole idea of a sugar daddy or a sugar mama, that's good for a short period of time. Being married 42 and a half years, there's sometimes I'd like to try it. But that's the lower mind. That's the lower relationship form coming in. That's because we have been so programmed by the physical senses and what we want from the physical senses. And then what happens? Once we've tasted it, we realize, no, it wasn't what we wanted in the first place. In my time, I've known a lot of men who have at some point in their relationship gone out and had a fling. And here's the key thing that all of them will come back and say. For those 20, 30 seconds of euphoric bliss, it wasn't worth the consequences that happened. See, when you really come down to it, you have to put it in perspective. Think about, from the standpoint, think of all the work that Bill Cosby did to build up the relationship of this phenomenal father figure, this wisdom figure, this person who could use comedy about families and about life and all of that. And he was renowned. He broke the glass ceiling around the African American man. He set a new goal there. And then what happened during the course of all that fame? Well, he has admitted to some, so we know that he has done some. He went out and did other things. And now what's happening? It's just a consequence. It's not right or wrong. I don't judge. It's a consequence. He did that, now this is happening. So you've got to be asking that question. I ask it all the time. As a minister, should I be caught smoking a joint? Only if I live in Colorado. Should I be caught going to a strip club? Never. Not like I would have done in my younger years. And let me say why. Is because in the role of the teacher that I am, I fully honor that a woman is equal to a man and that she is not just a sex symbol. I didn't know that. No one taught me that when I was young. No one taught most young men that type of thing. That's the idea. See, you can change. You can become that image, that you don't need to do the things you once did. You can learn from the things that you've done. Safety. Don't ever feel that being with a person is the reason you're safe. Safety is within yourself, within your own mind. I will share this with you, though. If you are ever in a place where you feel physically the potential of being attacked or violated, leave. Get out as fast as you can. If it happens to you and you can't get out, as soon as you can, get out. I'll say that immediately. There is never, ever, ever, ever an excuse for physical violence. Ever. There's something that person who would do that has a tremendous amount of work to do before they can heal themselves, so they won't be doing that again. So don't think it's going to change overnight. So get out of Dodge. And if you have children, take your children and leave. I talk about living and I've talked about living in balance, but I also want to talk about living in balance between our higher mind and our lower mind. The higher mind is the intuition. It's infinite wisdom coming down to us. You know, in that moment when all of a sudden this voice comes to you and tells you this is what I should do, that's higher mind telling you. That's the higher mind is what's going to draw you to your value. The higher mind is going to draw you to your purpose. Okay? That's what's going to really draw there. But then you've got the lower mind there that's physically in the senses. What you want to do, you want to balance it. Know that you're going to go off into the physical realm. That's okay. You're going to go there. But you're trying to balance it. You're trying to live in a conscious connection between the higher and the lower. And that may be for 10 seconds, 15 seconds at a time. Because we're in this human body and senses are going to rule us. But when you're asking questions about what's going on in my life, ask the questions from both perspectives. What would my higher mind say? What would my lower mind say? What's the balance? See, a lot of times people want to get out of the world and they want to transcend. I'm not a believer that you become a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist nun and you live in silence. I don't believe we were given this body temple to do that. I believe we were given this body temple to express and experience the fullness of life. And more importantly, we were given this body temple to interact. You see, I think the interaction between people is the reason we're here. I think it's critical to interact, but I also think it's important that we have time alone. I was an extreme extrovert. All the tests would tell you I'm off the chart in being an extrovert. But today, I've gotten to a point where I like about half of my time alone than half of my time with people. I like the quality of being with myself and just allowing myself to explore my inner mind and become clearer about where I'm at. I'm going to make this statement in my notes. This is in capital letters, every letter. It's also bold. It's green, underlined, and it says this: never, never, never change to please your partner. You change to please yourself. I've done so much counseling, and I go back to my own life where my partner would ask me to change, and I would, and it never worked. Because when I changed, it wasn't for me. If it's not for me, I can't be authentic. That's the key, authentic. That's why if you change, it's because you've decided that it's in your best interest to change to be the greater you. Okay? Let's move to another topic then. See how we're following it? We're progressing down the ladder. So what are the foundations of a relationship? The foundations of a relationship are having a common purpose. What I have understand is the common purpose is to support and grow each other. That's what I've understood. That's become really clear, is that my wife Jean has her own sets of values. She has her own purpose. And I'm there to support her in that. Now, what's sort of nice about it is, as the spiritual center has been created and built, she's decided that that's one of her values. So we do part of the dance together. But her value is not the same with regard to agape as mine is. This is probably my number one purpose, is to build a spiritual center, a place where people can come in safety, be taught principles that allow them to transform their lives and to be living in a state of self-love. That's my number one reason. I have people all the time. I've been asked to go to Maui and be a minister there. People say, well, you would love Colorado, come and live there. I would love to live in all those places. But what they don't understand, my number one purpose is building agape. And that's the agape here in Frisco, Texas. This is the place that I was called intuitively. I remember so clearly listening to that intuitive voice, walking out of the Angelica Theater in Plano, having just watched The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I wasn't even in a spiritual study at this time. So this is 15 years ago. And I said, if I were to build a spiritual home, it would be right in this area. And when we started Agape, the place that we had our first service was 1 block away in that neighborhood. See how intuition knows what's going on even before you've asked the question, but you've got to just sort of become aware that it's happening. You've got to become aware that, why is intuition giving you this hit? It's to tell you something. So you've got to know that. Here's the other thing. You've got to know your partner's values. If you know your values and you don't know your partner's values, you have nothing to communicate together on. How do you know what's important? How do you know how to be? How do you know how to support? Now think about this. Wouldn't that be a great way to spend several dates or time together? Let's explore values together. That's having a meaningful, deep conversation. We're not talking about Susie and Billy and Bob and what they're doing. We're not talking about soap operas. We're not talking about insignificant stuff. We're talking about meaningful stuff. When we have that heart-centered relationship, isn't that what we want to talk about? So if we can go and we can build the relationships on values, not only mine, but my partner's values, now we've got a foundation. Okay, here's the next thing. This is a good one now. So based on your values, we all have needs. There are certain things that we are not willing to bend on. Okay? There are certain things. I might like to have an open relationship where I could go have multiple partners and always come back to my wife. I dream about that often. The other side of the coin is my wife, her need is that her relationship with her partner is monogamous. She has that need. That is a clear value for her. So what we've done is we built an agreement. We mutually came and accepted that there would be an agreement there. So we have an agreement that we consciously chose about 20 years ago, I'm going to say, is when we formed these agreements. And that is, we will not have relations outside of our relations with each other. So the only way we have relations are with each other. Our other 4 agreements that we have are I would come first, or she would come first, when we let the other person know. Okay? The next one is we would share our money in a particular way together. We would raise our children together. And the last one is the partner has to ask for what they want when they want it. I'm going to tell you, write that statement down because that is a critical one. Your partner cannot read your mind. If you do not ask for it, they do not know. Now, your partner has the right to say no. But they can't say no if you don't ask. And I'm going to say many a couple that I've talked with throughout all my years. The husband wants something. I said, have you asked your wife? The wife wants something. I said, have you asked your husband? The answer is no. Well, they should know. They should be able to read my mind. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. Many a man has lied in bed waiting to have sex, thinking his partner's going to make a move. Many a woman has lied in bed waiting to have sex, thinking the partner's going to make a move. All they had to do was turn to the partner and say, do you want to make love? It would have happened. The same thing about the simplest things. I want to go on a retreat and I want to go by myself. You're afraid to ask because your partner might think, well, why? Well, wait, why don't you want me to be with you? Well, because I want to take care of me. I need time in my life to nurture me. This is not about you. You see, we get confused about being in a relationship that we have to do everything together. No, we do not. There's a time for nurturing our individual self. There's a time for the other person to individually nurture themselves. And there's a time when you collectively nurture yourselves. And we can't take it personally when the partner wants that time alone. Those agreements must be created in those areas of life where you have needs. Needs that you must say, I have to have this to feel safe. And that can change. That can change through the time. So you have to build the foundation. The foundation is your common purpose, support and grow each other. It's going to be what is your values, hers and yours, or his and yours. It's going to be needs defined and then agreements built around that. It might be as simple as this. If you have kids, I need to have an afternoon once every other week by myself. Or I need to have a night out with the girls or a night out with the guys. You may have that need to be outside. Or I have a need that we have a date night once a week. I know that when Gene and I had our sons, we had been 11 years of marriage without children. So we were very used to dating all the time. And then it became, when both of us agreed, when that first child hit 6 weeks old, we had a date night every Saturday. And we never violated that. We had a babysitter come in from the time that child hit 6 weeks, and every Saturday night we went out. It was a need for us to connect. It was our way of being. Because while family was important, we both knew that family would leave. And what we would have is each other. And what happens a lot of times in relationships is when kids come in, the relationship dies and the parenting continues, the kids leave and the relationship is totally empty and it cannot be salvaged. So my point was I saw this too often because think about it, I didn't have kids till I was 33, so I was watching those people around me that had kids 10 years earlier, watching their relationships non-exist. And I said, that's not going to happen with me. I want my relationship to continue. So I built in my own structure. You see, you can't be responsible for anyone else in your relationship. You have to be the one responsible. Don't wait for your partner to make the move. You make the move. Why? You're taking responsibility. You're the one that's going to experience it. Why not be responsible? Why do most relationships end? We've touched on this. We're relying on someone to make us happy. I want you to know that in a relationship, no one is right and no one is wrong. No one is good and no one is bad. And I counsel couples all the time. All the time. I counsel them individually or separately, and I tell them all the time, I don't care what happens to the relationship. I'm going to love you. I'm going to love you. And you're all welcome at Agape. Because it's not about the relationship that we're here. It's about individual growth. It's about individual lifting. It's about individual determining to higher values. It's about non-judgment. It's about acceptance. So you've got to accept People are going to do what's best for them in that moment, and you may not agree with it. Well, it's not your business. Can I be more clear about it? It's got nothing to do with you. People are going to make the mistakes they make, and so love them. Just accept them and hug them and say, I support you. That's a fun relationship to be in. And you know, this right or wrong thing, why are people right or wrong? Why is something good or bad? It's only because people have different beliefs. Once I got that, it changed everything. Try to get a Republican to think that having a minimum wage of $15 is a good thing is never going to happen. Because they have a belief that there should not be an attached thing. But take a Democrat over here and say $15, well, that means there's that much more disposable income, which means that much more income will be spent, which means that much more will be consumed. They cannot see the other side. The problem is that both of them have a consciousness of lack. Because in the divine, there is no limitation, there's no cap, there's no nothing. It doesn't matter in the divine. Here's what I found out. 3 times I've been let go of my job. 3 times, in all 3 times that I was let go of my job, I was the primary breadwinner. I was a primary breadwinner in that I made probably 60 to 65% of the family revenue. Okay? I lost my job, Jean's income came in and replaced. We always had more than enough money. We never, ever tapped into savings. The universe provided for us. It's a belief. I always knew that no matter what, we would be taken care of. And the second something was going to happen, we were going to tap into something, we were going to say we had to tap into savings, the new job appeared or more money came in. It's a belief that you have that the universe is an infinite supply and it will always show up for you. See, when you have the belief that you are always being taken care of, that it will always show up, it will. But if you have a belief in scarcity, you're going to have that scarcity show up time in and time out. I got to demonstrate that when I was taught this idea of tithing. I'm going to tell you, I didn't buy the crap about tithing. I think that's made up for the church to get money. And so I wouldn't do it. I was a tipper. I tipped for years. We're making $150,000, $200,000 as a family, and we're giving $10 a week. Then I got bold. I went up to $25 a week. Then I got bold. I went to $50. Then I went to $100. $100 a week, 52 weeks means I was giving $5,200 a year. Is that right? That's pretty simple math, right? If you're making $200,000 a year, that's what, 2.5%? That's a quarter of tithing. I went from 100 to tithing. What happened to my income? It went up by 50%. Lost my job. We continued to tithe, but we tithe on what you make. What happened? I got another job. Jean got more bonuses. Money came through this. Money came through that. It never ceases to amaze me. That's why I'm a believer in it. I don't buy it because the Bible says to do it. I don't buy anything that the Bible says. I test it for myself if it works. So what I'm saying about that is, in relationships, know that you are only going to get back to you what you believe you are, what you believe you are worthy, and you've got to do the work on yourself before you can bring anyone else in. The key thing to remember is no one can hurt you. You can never, ever be hurt unless you give your power away. I can remember in college when I was broken up with once, only once, that they broke up with me. And it hurt like hell. It really, really, really hurt. And then I can remember the time that I just broke up with someone, didn't feel a darn thing. Why, in one respect, did I feel so hurt, and the other, It was my attachment to what I felt about myself, about me being rejected by someone else. I was attached to my good, my higher esteem by what someone else felt about me. I vowed after that experience it would never happen again. So I am so grateful for all that I went through. So grateful, because without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to be so firm that I will never give my power away again. So if something happens to Jean, if she leaves the planet, aliens take her away, I will be sad. But I will move on, because the essence of who I am is still Lee. Jean allows me to be creative, but Jean is not who Lee is. Lee is Lee. And the beauty of it is, go back to the agreements. Did you hear in the agreements that I'm not to be with other women? Did you hear in the agreements I can't have fun with other women? Not at all. So when I go to a minister's retreat and I'm hanging around female ministers, I have a ball. If a community member here, there's several community members here that have asked me to go to lunch, or that I go to lunch, we have a ball, we laugh, we joke, we have fun together, we enjoy each other's company. Am I cheating on Jean? Not in the least. Why? We have those agreements, right? When you're functioning within those agreements, you never have to question what your partner's doing. And you never have to question, am I stepping outside? No, this is my agreement. Am I stepping outside of it? No, I'm not. Let's go. See, that's freedom. And here's the number one thing. To be in a higher level relationship, the one thing you will want more than anything is your freedom. The second you don't feel free, you're going to rebel, I promise you. You may rebel aggressively, or you will rebel passive-aggressively. But you will rebel, and it's only a matter of time. We were born individualized. We were born to be free. From the moment we came out of our mother, we were breaking away. Think about that. No matter what that baby was doing, it was hugging you, it was needing you, it was breaking away. It was doing everything it could to break away, to be independent. And that's what you want for your children. That's what you want. You want your partners to be free. You want your partner to walk up and say, I'm going to do this because it's going to nurture my soul. And you go, great. It's part of our agreements. Go ahead, do it. It's so easy to be in relationship when you have that. So, when I was with John DeMartini at the Imperience Experience, we were talking about the solar system. And we were talking about black holes. And I just loved the conversation, because I've never been one that's been fascinated with the solar system, but I have a son who just goes nuts on the whole thing of planets and space travel and all of that. It's his passion. And John was talking about black holes and how the purpose of a black hole is to suck in everything. Just suck in everything in its path, and it just destroys it, and it spits it out the other end, which is a white hole. It spits it all out. And then out of the other end, all of that stuff, that stardust and everything, it forms new stars, it forms new galaxies. In other words, the universe is recreating, it is recycling itself. Same thing in relationships. There are stages of relationships. I love these stages. Stage one is infatuation. Do you all know that stage? That's the Google Puss stage. That's where you're lovey-dovey. That's where you're touching, where you're smooching in public. That's where you do this thing on Seinfeld where they had the thing, oh, my little schmooky pookie, I love you so much. And they do this baby talk thing, and they do all this ridiculous stuff. What is the infatuation stage reality? It is only seeing what you like in the other person. You are mesmerized, that you want to be in that state forever. I remember so clearly, I had a 1968 Mercury Montego, black, with beautiful black bench seats. And Jean would sit right next to me. And I'd have my arm around her, on her leg, and I said to her, we will always have bench seats and sit next to each other. You ever been there? And then what happens about a year later? You know, I'm a bit hot. Can you move over just a little bit? You know, I'm trying to turn, my arm's hitting you. Can you just scoot over? Wait a second, why don't we get a car with bucket seats? That was the easy. Get a bucket seat, now you can be apart. What happened? We went to phase 2, indifference. Indifference is that numb state where you're really not focusing on the good or you're not focusing on the bad. You're just numb. You're just living in the relationship. It might be just comfortable or it's not too painful to get around. And you could be in that state for a long, 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 long time. You know, it's a state where we're not even conscious. We're not conscious of the good. We're not conscious of the bad. But you know what happens after indifference? Resentment. You ever been in that state? Oh, yes, we have. I'm looking at your faces. Resentment is that state where the indifference has caused you to go to a place where you're only seeing what you don't like. And you focus on it, and you can go to your girlfriends or you can go to your boyfriends, and you are going to blow that bastard up, or you're going to blow that bitch out of proportion, and they are just the devil, the Antichrist, those scum suckers. If they ever come in my life, I'll get my daddy's shotgun and shoot them. You know what I'm saying? It's that way. And we get to that point, and that point, depending on how much pain tolerance we have, that's the point where relationships mostly break up, in resentment. The role of being in a higher level relationship is to help the partner, to help yourself come back into balance. It's to come back and see that there are as many positives as there are negatives. To come back and appreciate the person for who they are, to start to get them to refocus. You see, that's about where they talk about the idea of forgiveness, okay? Forgiveness is really about bringing everything into balance. Think about the forgiveness exercise where on one side of the paper you write down all the bad things that happened in regard to something, and on the other side you write down everything good that could have possibly happened, and you do that until you find that the event that you're looking at is balanced, it is neutral. Okay? When it's neutral, what happens? There's no longer charge. That's the same thing about bringing the relationship back into balance. You don't have to wait for it to get out of balance. You can just, at the end of the day, you could be there and you could say, what am I grateful for about my partner today? That simple practice will cause you to balance out your day, to balance out what you feel about the person. That's a huge practice. When you're in balance, you're in love. It's not when you're in infatuation. It's not when you're in indifference. It's not when you're in resentment. It's when you are in balance. That's the love relationship. It's when we see how the relationship, balance is about seeing how the relationship is both supporting us and growing us in the same moment. That's what balance is about. It's always about that. I was never told that. Here's what it is. Let's talk about heaven and hell. Heaven is a state of gratitude. Hell is a state of ingratitude. Heaven is focusing on that balance. Hell is seeing it out of balance. Both ways. Happy, sad are hell. Because if you are attached to either of those, you're going to eventually be in hell. You're addicted. I see some deep breathing. Hit someone's nerve, I know. This is something it took me a while to accept, to embody, to understand. I'm not saying don't feel happy. Be in it. When you are in that bliss state, be there fully present in it. Just don't be attached to being in it all the time. Allow the ebb and flow of life to know that at a moment, I'm not in the bliss. Okay, where am I? I'm in the middle place. Okay, where am I now? Oh, I'm down below. Okay, don't be attached to it. What can I do to support myself, or how can my partner support me to bring me back up? You see, it's about always coming back to balance. And no, once you're in that balance state, you're going to have the contrast automatically to take you up or down, right? Because you've got to have the contrast for further growth. So you're always going to be doing this over the balancing line. But the idea is come back to balance so you don't stay stuck in one or the other, because you can't. Because if you're stuck in one or the other, there cannot be contrast. And contrast is critical to growth. You have to have it. That's part of the human form. That's why we were given senses that rubbing like this feels good. Poking like this does not feel good. The senses are about what feels good and what doesn't feel good. So if you've got 5 senses telling you that, it tells you that contrast is inevitable in this form. So don't reject the contrast. True bliss is a balanced state. That's my words. As I formulated this, I tried to decide how did I want to express it. And for me, true bliss is the balanced state. When I'm aware that I'm in balance, I realize that my higher mind and my lower mind are functioning at that point of connection. There's no greater power in the world than to be aware and to know it. You are both the observer and the observed, conscious of each other in that moment. That's perfect balance. That is bliss. And I believe that only way we can achieve that, truly achieve that, is in relationship. Either with ourselves, first and foremost with ourselves, and then secondarily with others. This is a pretty simple one, but if you're going to be in a relationship with anyone, you've got to know what is your love language. You know, there was a book that came out by it, and it was really a simple book. It's basically saying you got to rank them. Physical touch, words of praise, acts of service, quality time, giving gifts or receiving gifts. Those are the 5 love languages. So if you're sitting here like mine, I'm physical touch, quality time, acts of service, words of praise, gifts. If you want to do something to please me, don't give me a gift. It's last on my list. Come and give me a hug. That's first on my list. Second on my list is spend quality time with me. I love quality time. For me, quality time I enjoy it. One-on-one, eye-to-eye conversation, that to me is great. Laughing hysterically, going on a roller coaster. My wife doesn't want to go on roller coasters. So if anyone wants to come and go with me to Six Flags, and we'll go there, ride the roller coasters, and scream like little boys and girls, I'll go with you. I'll leave my wife at home. I've done it before. All you got to do is ask. What did I say earlier, Becky? Ask for what you want when you want it. You see, when you know these things, think about it. If your number 1 is physical touch, and your partner's is gift giving, and her last one is physical touch, you could have an issue. Not an issue that the values or the languages are different, but if you don't know the languages, that's where you have an issue. But if you know where their love language is, now you know how to support them by speaking that language. You see, there's not a right way or a wrong way to be, but the wisdom of knowing it allows you to dance. It says you don't want to be doing the samba while they're doing the tango. See, there's no right way to be. So if I've got a love language of a physical touch, does my wife have to have a love language of 1 or 2 being physical touch? No. It's just we have to be aware so that she has to say, well, this is where Lee is here. This is where I am. Then you sort of say, well, is he meeting my desires here? You question that. And you sit down and you have conversations. When your love languages aren't being met, you don't demand it. You sit down and you say, I have needs. And these are my needs. I would ask this. And you go, oh, okay. And if you're in partnership, you're there to support and grow the person, right? So it's no problem. I remember my wife telling someone in this community about a year ago that they sort of said, Lee's quite a physically active man for his age. And he's quite demanding on that physical activity. And Jean made the comment to the person was that when she made the decision to get married, she said, I chose at that moment to be easy. So she said if she's going to commit to the relationship, knowing what my love language was, she just surrendered into that, and it's caused me eternal bliss. I'll get into her eternal bliss when we talk about sex. Again, only from my perspective. If you want hers, you have to ask her privately on that. But you see, and it's not necessarily as black and white as this, but if you have this as talking points, it's like values. It gives you something to talk about. I know that there are people in this community that physical touch, for whatever reason, is dead last. When I know that, do I touch that person? I honor it. Because why? It's a love language. If you know something bothers someone, you don't do it. That's simple. Make sense? What are some empowering love questions? I love love questions because these are what conversations of meaning should have. Here's a great one. What would you have to give up to better accept yourself? Think about that. What would you have to give up to better accept yourself? Then you follow that question. What would the benefits be by accepting yourself? So you're looking at it. What do I have to give up to better accept myself? And then you're filling it with what are the benefits if I do better accept myself? That's one you do by yourself. Now, if you have a partner, what would the benefits be, or what would I have to give up to better accept my partner? And then what would the benefits be if I accepted my partner? See, those questions can come up over and over and over and over again in a relationship. Because why? The relationship is always changing. It is always changing. And I'm going to drop back. I'm going to drop back to the phases of relationships. Because we've got that phase where we go and we infatuate, we are indifferent, and we repent. Not repent. Oh, God. Jesus, you're back in my life. I'm repenting for you. We regret, resent. We resent. It's the recreation process. Every time we come back to balance, we raise ourselves. We come up to a higher level. And we get to start all over again. Because in the 42 and a half years of marriage, I've been married many times. Just to the same woman. That's the beauty of a long-term relationship. It's also the beauty that you could have in multiple relationships. It doesn't have to be with the same person. But the relationship is always changing. The relationship dies when it does not change. Because the essence of life is always changing. You are always changing. Therefore, the relationship is always changing. To think that it's going to remain the same, you're damning yourself right there to misery. You're damning yourself into a state that can never be. It just can never be. So I just want to say, ask yourself these questions and ask yourself these empowering questions at different times because you've become a different person. And when you become a different person, you got to say, do I really want to accept this new me? What would I have to let go to accept the higher vision? Let's say you have a higher purpose now. Let's say your overall purpose has changed. Well, to become that overall purpose, you've got to adapt different values, don't you? Well, are those values really me? And if I do those values, what do I have to let go of? Do I want to let go of this value that was there? And you really have to do some weighing. You have to weigh the new value versus the old value. Does it really fall off? And I had to think about that with respect to family. Does family fall off as a value? And yes, it does for me. So when I think about it now, I've got my higher value of self-actualization. If I'm self-actualized, do my wife and children get a benefit? Yes. If I'm teaching and speaking about what I love the most, do my wife and children get a benefit? If I'm learning more about what I'm passionate about, do my wife and children get a benefit? If I am building a great community of like-minded people, do my wife and children get a benefit? If I'm experiencing my life and my senses to its very fullness, do my wife and children get a benefit? So am I still supporting my family even though my value is not my family? For me, the answer was yes. So my family still has an importance. It's just not number one. But my family is reaping the benefits. And what I'm doing is my values, if you heard them, they're not only supporting me, but my values support everyone that I come in contact with. Because if I'm a self-actualized Lee, everyone I meet gets to see that. If I'm teaching and speaking about what I love, everyone gets to experience that. If I'm learning more, everyone gets to share that. If I'm building a community, everyone gets to feel what it's like to be in that community. And if I'm experiencing my physical senses right, well, that could be a benefit. Let's go to this thing we call sex. I can't tell you how many times I have talked with people, and this is a major problem in a relationship. It's either one wants it more, one wants it less, one's not satisfied, the other is not satisfied. It's not often enough. I want to have multiple partners. It's just not important to me. It's everything for him. It's everything for her. It's not for me. I want to say that there's two aspects to sex. There's the physical act of sex. That is the lower mind. That is the act of physical senses. It is a wonderful and beautiful act. There's also the act of making love. Making love does not necessarily mean having sex. Making love can be sitting and looking into a person's eyes and saying words of truth. But making love can also be looking to a person's eyes and having sex. We were taught, or I was taught, or I was not taught, that making love was closing your eyes and doing the dirty. That is not making love. Making love is being fully present, being fully aware, with eyes wide open, fully understanding. I learned a lesson from a beautiful young woman when I was but a mere 19 years old. And this woman taught me this. She said, the more you do to please your partner, the more your partner will do to please you. And those words never, ever, ever left me. So when I'm in a relationship and I know what my partner's desires are, I will do everything to make that partner feel the best that they can. I do not believe that age is a limiting factor on the experience of this great act. I believe that it is something that every couple has and does with different frequency, with different style, and that there is no right or wrong. For some people, it might be a daily thing. For some people, it might be a weekly thing, a twice-a-week thing, a monthly thing. It might be a seasonal thing. It might be a yearly thing. It doesn't matter. It's what do the two people in the relationship, what agreement have they reached with each other? You see, that's what's important. Here's what I also believe. As I said, I believe people don't talk about sex. I think people think that sex is something dirty and bad. It is not. It is as natural as going to the bathroom. You have a desire that's innate within you to procreate. That desire is there. You get to choose how you do that. You get to agree with a partner as to what is right in your relationship. I think that the biggest fault with sex today is that couples do not communicate. Before sex, during sex, after sex. Now, the after sex communication only applies if the man has not fallen asleep. However, we've got to understand that it's a beautiful act between people who love each other. Do you see the difference that I'm making here? These are two people who have committed in relationship to be with each other. Therefore, in my mind, I don't care who the people are. I don't care if it's a woman on woman, man on man, man on woman. I do not judge that in any way, shape, or form. I think people have a right to choose who they love. I think people are born a specific way to choose who they love, and I am not one to judge. I just know that love is a beautiful thing, and two people have that right for each other. And I think, for me, as much as I strive to be an expert on teaching spiritual truth, how I strive to learn more about physical fitness, how I strive to learn more about how to manage money, I also strive to understand physical expression to a greater level all the time. I think we're fools if we think that we know it all at any one moment on any subject. There should always be experimentation. There should always be, what can we do more? How can we make this more intimate, into my eyes, into your eyes I see. How do we get to make this something that is so beautiful, that is beyond belief, that we can't wait to be with each other? I think that sex is something that's been given a bad rap. I think we've downgraded it. I think we've made it dirty, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. In the old days, when people lived in one room, the mother and father would make love in front of the whole family, and it was considered normal. Today we would go, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. Mom, Dad, cover those things up. Don't do that, kick us out. We've been built that it's a dirty thing. You got to ask the question, why do we believe that? And here's what I understood. I was with all these people at this event that were from around the world. And around the world, they have very different views than Americans do. Very different views. I want you to know I came back and I was very excited. And I had to share this with Jean. Because all these women were from around the world. And they came up like 6 different ones, came up at different times. And they said, do you know you have a very sexy voice? I said, I do. And I said, where were you when I was 19? Why was the voice sexy? It was different. It's like if I heard an English woman or a French woman, or you heard an English man or a French man right now. There's something about difference that causes us to feel different. We're always looking for that, oh, it's a different, why? It's not that it would be better. It's just it would be a different sensory experience. We are in the physical body. So I share that. Strive to always be better. I got one more. This was a real good one. I was interviewed by a young French couple. They were 26 years of age. They've been together for 4 years. His business is doing video interviews. And he asked, while I was at this conference, would I be interviewed so that he could send this video out to his subscriber base in Europe? And I said, sure. So as we went through the interview, he really started to focus on relationships. So the whole interview ended up being about relationships. And he asked me some very pointed questions. And he says, you've been married 42 and a half years. He said, I'll bet you've seen your wife's body change an awful lot. And his question was very common. How have you been able to remain the same attracted to a body that no longer looks like the body that she had when you married her? He says, what do you do when you see a beautiful woman walk by that's very, very young and sexy and shaped in that? And he added more to that description. And I just sat there for a second as he finished his question. I looked at him and I said, you know, when I see a beautiful woman, I don't lust after her, but I appreciate her. I learned that appreciating a woman's beauty is not a bad thing. But what I also know is that the woman that I married, whose body has gone from 125 bikini to at one point 200 to probably now, I don't know, 145, 150. I know that that same body is attached to a woman who loves and supports me, gives me freedom to be me, and when I'm with her, there can be no greater physical expression or experience that I could possibly have. So what I said is that it is not the body that causes the experience, it's the mind and the view of the mind and the perception of the mind about the individual that you are engaged with. That's what it's about. So I wanted to just share that with you, because I don't know that anyone would share it that honestly or share it that directly. But for me, that's how I think. So I'm sharing it with you. Complaining. I titled this section Complaining instead of Communicating, because in most relationships, all you hear are complaints. I mean, it is left and right. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. Oh, so-and-so's doing this. Do you believe that? All conversation is centered on this idea of complaining. And that, my friends, is as low level a relationship as any two individuals can possibly have. Because it is not steeped in higher values. It's not steeped in lower values. It's not steeped in higher purpose. It's not steeped in lower purpose. It's not steeped in spiritual purpose. So I'm just being really clear that it is not an effective form of communication in a relationship, and it is not going to ever nurture it. It's expressing a desire for a need that has not been agreed upon, and you're doing it in an indirect, passive-aggressive, or in an aggressive fashion that is not going to serve the long-term existence of the relationship. Asking a question is far different than complaining. Questions are wonderful. There is no greater way. Questions with judgment are not wonderful. Did you hear that? Questions without judgment are wonderful. Questions with judgment in the question? No. Don't waste your time. You're going to exactly get back to the energy you put out. So if you put out a question with judgment, you're going to get an answer with judgment back, and it ain't going to be a positive thing. It's going to be one of those discussions that are not very fun. Here's the other thing. When you're asking a question, ask the question and don't assume that you know what's going on inside your partner. Don't ask the question just for the sake of getting affirmed. Ask the question to truly know what your partner's thinking, not wanting them to respond to you the way you want them to respond. Let them be authentic with you and give them their answer. And then don't judge them by their answer, but then take that answer and sort of say, okay, so how does that fit into your values? And he'll look at it, or she'll look at it and say, okay, in my values, this is where they are, and that's why this fits here. Then you look at it and say, where are my values? Now, how does that answer fit into my values? Okay, now, is there a possible need involved? Is there something, maybe an agreement has to be reached on? Probably not. Most things like that are not that big. They don't need any more discussion. It's just a matter we get tapped into a belief and we want to be right, we want to be right, we want to be right. And in that wanting to be right, we don't realize most of the things we want to be right on, there's no value, there's no importance. Here's one that I want to say really clear. Don't try to fix your partner. Ever. Support your partner. Do not try to fix them. They are not broke. Based on their consciousness, based on their values, based on their purpose, in that moment, they're exactly where they should be. Your role is to support them and to grow them. And you ask simple questions. Let's talk about your top 5 values. Have they changed? Based on those values, what do you see your purpose as? You're having a meaningful discussion without belittling. You're having a meaningful discussion about growing them. They'll want to dance because that's a dance we all want to do. Most importantly, this is one of the things that I've really observed. Before you say anything, ask, is this in the highest support and growth of my partner, or is this in my highest support and growth of myself? Or is this my little ego wanting to be right? Ask yourself that question. Pause. This is where meditation comes in. And when we meditate, we get those 3 seconds that we can pause before we blurt out. We have verbal diarrhea on ourselves and the other person, where we can pause and we can ask these questions. I think that's real important. So then, how do we create our dream relationship? We go back and we discover, who are we? What do we value? What is our purpose? What is the purpose of a relationship? Am I even open to having a a relationship. We have to let go of all expectations. You see, if we've set it out there, if we become authentic, if we put out that we're open, don't expect, allow, it will be better than you think. Do we live each day totally fulfilled? Do we close each day in gratitude? And here is the key. This is the last thing I'm going to share with you today. And to me, this is the crux of everything. It is only when we are totally focused on authentically living our values to our higher purpose that we will attract a partner that will support and grow with us. Did you hear that? It is only when we are authentically living our highest values and our purpose that we will attract a partner to support and grow us. Do you notice in that statement there was no online dating, there was no going to the bars. It was about becoming the man or the woman that is so authentic and real that that partner will appear when we're least expecting it. So with that, I'm going to open up to questions. If you have a question, I have a microphone sitting in the front row. I would ask you to just come to that microphone and ask your question, and we'll go from there. So who has a question? Okay. The question is, how do you ask questions without judgment? Let's pick a topic that is one that comes up all the time, weight. Your partner has a weight thing going on. First thing is, the question is, are you being authentic in how you treat yourself with respect to that? Then you might go and you might be sitting down and you're talking about your values. And you find out where is the value of your partner with respect to health. And you ask the question, how do you feel about your health? Do you feel that your body's expressing everything you want your body to express? And just shut up. You don't have to put anything more into the question after that. You don't go in, are you exercising enough? Do you think maybe you should change what you're eating? Do you think maybe that dress would fit better? Do you think maybe you shouldn't wear stripes that go across like this on that dress? You know, do you think you should do all these things? No. You ask the question, how is your health supporting your highest vision? Is your health what you want it? And if she makes the comment, do you think you're fat? Do you know what? That's her issue. You bring it right to it. It's your issue. I'm not judgment of your weight. I'm asking you a question. Are you as healthy as you want to be to live your dream? And let's put it this way. A woman's body should be the unique creation of the woman in the body, not what society says it should be. There is not a perfect way of having a body with perfect measurements, meeting a perfect dress. And I think that's one of the things that has to be thought of up front is that a woman, if she's going to be herself, authentic in a relationship, living to her highest values, she's already created her body. You don't even have to ask the question. You see, if you're doing everything already to be your authentic and self-love place, you don't have to worry about yourself. And if you're attracting a partner, they're already going to be there too. It's only when you're living in the lower level relationships that you have these issues that surface. Another question will come up with money. How are we spending our money? The wife may have, I'm picking on the wife in this case, but it's not the wife, it could be the husband. They have a spending thing going on. And maybe as a relationship, you've got a thing that you want to retire at 54. In order to retire at 54, you've set aside a savings goal with an investment plan on top of it that will allow you to do that. But based on it, your outflow is greater than your inflow. In that moment, you sit down with your partner and says, let's review our finances. Let's sit down. We have an overall goal of this. We have met with the financial planners. This is what we agreed we would do, but here is our spending. Based on this, we'll never achieve that goal. Do we need to adjust our goal, or do we need to look how we're spending? Do you know, nothing was ever said, you need to do this. It was about we need to look at. I think the word we is sometimes very quickly dismissed, and we want to point the finger at the other. But in the relationship where there are common goals, it has to be a we thing. Well, if the values are different, you should have already formed agreements up front. And maybe now it's time to relook at those values and say, okay, see, when you're getting into a serious discussion about an issue, you want to put your 5 values up, you want to put their 5 values up, and you want to then look at the issue and say, now, okay, here's what we're looking at. How do they fit in with our top values? What if the issue is not even a top 5 value? Then the question becomes, do we need to move this up? Or maybe it's not a top 5 value. Maybe we don't need to spend as much time here. Maybe we're worrying about something. Maybe what we're worried about is a symptom of something happening in the top 5 values that we're not aware of, that we're not even expressing. But you see, the key to how we do all of this is, are we aware of what we know about do we know what our relationship is with ourselves? Do we know the purpose of our relationship? Do we know our values? Do we know the others, our purpose? Do we know the others' values and purpose? Do we know their love languages? See, when we talk about spending money, gifts could come in here. Well, wait a second, she's buying a lot of gifts, but it's number 5 on her thing. Why is she buying gifts? What is she sabotaging for? Or he sabotaging for? You see, there's so many ways that when we have the foundation, the conversations become easier. But where I think you're coming from in this instance, Becky, is that the foundation hasn't been laid. The values aren't determined. You're not coming from where you've got the basis. Because then the discussions are easy and they happen quickly and they're done with. I know that for me, the discussions in my relationship, when they happen, if I'm off sync or Jean's off sync, it's a matter of saying, this is not in your values, you're doing this. That's the discussion, the change is made. Because once I know it's my values, I'm not living up to it, I'm changing. Because I've determined it's my value, it's not her value. Here's a simple way to not give away your power. The simple answer of no. And the simple answer of no said with a reason. No, tonight we're not going to have sex. I have a headache. I've been working with the kids all day. I've had a long and stressful day, and right now I just need to have some rest. We'll look at the situation tomorrow again. It's that simple. It's about being authentic and being with it without saying no and putting emotion behind it, but to simply claim for yourself, no. It could be the thing, the husband wants to go out and buy a $70,000 truck, for example, and you've got a goal that you're saving money for your kids' education. You simply look at him and say, no, we have a goal, and that goal is that we will put our kids through college, and we have a plan. Purchasing of that truck will provide no greater utility or no greater satisfaction than if we purchase one at $35,000. Therefore, as part of this relationship, I'm not in agreement that we should buy that truck. So my answer is no. That's simple, and stand on it. There's no point in arguing anymore. You've made your point. And when the partner looks at it, they will agree. And then if it becomes a bit heated, say, let's put this aside and let's talk about this another day. The idea is never address an issue when it's an emotional fireball. Never address an issue when it's an emotional fireball. You let it sit for a day, 2 or 3 days. You never think you can fix an issue when there's a big emotion attached with one person. It is not going to happen. They are not going to see clearly. They are not going to see their values. They're not going to see your values. They're not going to know your purpose. You're not going to know their purpose. They're not going to know their love languages. At that moment of emotion, they want to be right and only right, and they don't give a damn about anything else. And that's not what you want. So say, you know what? At this point, we've introduced a new concept. Let's talk about this in a couple days. And you're done with it. Now, in that couple days, don't be walking around on eggshells, on pins and needles, because that's what happens. Oh, I'm pissed at you. I'm not going to do anything. No, walk around like nothing happened. Because in your mind, nothing really happened. It's just a point you're going to discuss at a later time. And really, the only attachment you have to something is the belief you put behind it. Well, you know, belief is just a series of thoughts. You can change your thoughts. The question I always ask before I get an emotional tizzy, is this really worth it? Is this really that big an issue? We don't do that a lot of times. We blow little things up to be big issues. And maybe it just might be that the issue that you wanted to blow up about really meant, we haven't had a date in a while, and I'd just like to go out and spend 2 hours at dinner and just talk with you. Could be just that simple, and most of the time it's that simple. See, if I knew Mary's love language was quality time, and I happen to know it's one of her top ones, if she came to me, I would say, let's go spend some quality time together and talk. I wouldn't even bother wasting the time to resolve the issue then. I would simply set up a date, and then we would go out and give her the quality time. I guarantee you there won't be an issue. I promise. She's smiling, so I know I'm right. See, I know Mary very well. We've been together for, God knows, 10 or 12 years that we've known each other. And as a part of the community, we've done this work together. I talk with Mary every week, so I know where she is. And I know how important it is for eye-to-eye contact and honest and open communication. So if I ever feel something going on with Mary, something that's off-center, I'll say, let you and I talk. Better yet, what she does is she'll come over and say, let you and I talk. She's not shy. You see, she knows what she wants and she goes for it. She's living that love language. That's what I'm saying. When you know the love language, live it, because we have an agreement. You see, just like I have agreements with my wife, I have agreements with all the leaders of Agape and the leaders that are board members. So the relationships that I'm talking about are not all love relationships. They are relationships that you use with everyone in your life. Every one of my board members, every one of my volunteers know who I am, and once every other week, we talk and we have open, honest communications about where they are, and then we resolve anything to the best of we're supportive of each other to the best of the ability so that there are never issues at Agape. We don't have issues in running this business because we're applying these principles of living in love. Being on the board at Agape is not like being on the board anywhere else. It is truly a love relationship. And we are very bold, we are very candid, we are very blunt. But it's always for the higher expression of the community. It's the higher expression of love. What else? So the question was, when is the right time to walk away from a relationship that's no longer working? And that does happen. And so what I've come to understand is, as I've observed, as I've studied, I've walked away from many relationships in my life. What I ask the question is this relationship serving my growth, and is it supporting me? Have I done everything I possibly can to open myself up to seeing this relationship differently? Is there a way that I can support and help my partner grow that I haven't thought of? Have I sat down and talked to this person about what might it take that we might have a better relationship that is mutually best serving for both? If I have done all of those things and there is no resolution, and I realize that for my own self-love, I will walk away from the relationship. And I'll do so without judgment. I will know that the relationship served me, that relationship grew me, that I benefited from the relationship. I'm not angry at the person, but there was a reason and a season that we were together, and now it's time for me to allow myself to step into a greater me and allow my partner or that partner to step into their greater you. It's never done with emotion. It's about done from what is in the highest interest of me expressing self-love and what is in the highest interest of them expressing self-love. And that may not be in this time, in this place, in this life. Okay? And I want you to know that it's not easy. When we do it, we still hurt. But I'll tell you this, after you're done, there will be a sense of relief. And that sense of relief comes because you've stood in your power and you've been authentic with your love. That's a gift. So the question is, when is the time to leave a work relationship? I believe when the work relationship is not serving your higher value. I believe that every time I've been let go from a career, It's because that career wasn't serving my highest value. So in a work relationship, it's real simple. We have a specific position we're doing. We're measured against that position. Based on the service we provide, we are remunerated. We have the opportunity to be remunerated at a higher level when we give a greater level of service or we've taken on additional responsibility. The question is that serving me? It could be as simple as that I am working to make money to do this, and doing this supports my highest value. So the work may not be a direct thing, but we've linked it to achieving a higher goal that is serving our higher value. But I believe that work should be using the creative force within us that gives us joy. I would say that if we're having problems, we're probably not using our creative talents as quickly as we can, or we're not speaking up for what we want. We're not speaking to our boss, hey, I need to be more challenged. Or, hey, you haven't given me clear communication as to what are your expectations of me. Or what is the expectation you have for me to work with this person? Give me clear, concise ideas here. So once you have the framework, then it's easier to work in. But the key thing is you have to accept the people you work with as they are. They're not going to change. And if you see that they're not the right people, then it's time to leave. I have a woman that I know at the gym, and for 7 months or more, she comes in with a migraine headache every day, and it's all about her job. And I'm saying, how long is it going to take you to realize that you're not able to shift your perspective to see that job differently and have a different experience? Your body's going to continue to give you sign after sign. Do you want to end up in the hospital? We become attached to the way things are instead of knowing that they can be more. Remember, you're an infinite expression, and as an infinite expression, you are without limitation. Well, then I want to thank you for your time in coming today. And I want you to know I planted a lot of information out there. And I want you to just let it be. Don't think too hard, just let it be in your mind, because it will come, and in the least moment you won't realize it, you'll start to contemplate, and you'll start to build your perspective for yourself. And what I know is that there is an infinite wisdom that is in you, and it will guide you at the perfect time, in the perfect way, so that you create a self-love that attracts love from outside. Have a good day.